Hotham.
Speaker, I move the motion relating to Cambodia in the terms of which it appears on the notice paper.
And the call is to the member for Hotham.
Speaker, I rise today in sadness and in anger to express my deep concern about recent human rights abuses in Cambodia. And I ask today that the Australian government join me in speaking out against recent actions of the Cambodian government. We condemn violence against protesters. We ask that Cambodian authorities release those detained for social and political activism. We ask for a Cambodia free of corruption and a democratic Cambodia free of violence. Deputy Speaker, I do so on behalf of all of my constituents in Hotham, because we have the great privilege of sharing our home with so many Cambodian Australians. There are about 11,000 Cambodians living in Victoria, and 2,000 of them have made their home right in my electorate of Hotham. It's a community with driven, passionate leaders who are engaged in political life both here and back at home in Cambodia. Leaders such as Hong Lim MP, the member for Clayton, and very proudly Australia's first Cambodian-born Member of Parliament. Leaders like Councillor Yu Horn Chia, a community hero and City of Greater Dandenong councillor and former mayor. Leaders like Councillor Heng Meng Tak, a young leader, already a respected and distinguished person who is just starting out his journey as a councillor in the City of Greater Dandenong. And they are representative of so many other leaders, some of whom are joining us here today in the chamber from Cambodian associations around Hotham and beyond. Speaker, we're also very lucky to benefit from the spiritual guidance and leadership of monks from the significant temples in my electorate of Hotham. The Wat Buddarangsi in Clark Road, the Khmer Buddhist Centre of Victoria on Springvale Road, the Thamram Temple in Balmoral Avenue, and I want to pay my respects to those religious leaders who are represented here in the chamber today. Sum Swatum, welcome to our parliament. For Australia, Cambodia is a neighbour, but more than that, a friend. We have welcomed Cambodians to our country since the 1970s and allowed and welcomed people to build new lives here. We enjoy a strong trading relationship, and the relationship between Australia and Cambodia is really that of a genuine friendship. In such a friendship, you can have frank discussions, and that's what I want to do today. In July 2013, there was a general election held in Cambodia. There was a fear that those elections would not be fair, a fear founded quite reasonably on the unwillingness of the Cambodian government to implement the recommendations on corruption and electoral fraud of the United Nations Special Rapporteur in 2012, and the fact that Sam Rainsy, Cambodia's opposition leader, was not given free rights to stand in that election. Concerns about the election process quickly turned to civil unrest, and perhaps the most shocking incident occurred in January, where we saw garment workers shot and imprisoned for participating in protests simply for demanding a higher wage. 5 people were killed, 23 were arrested, and assembly was banned. Recently, I was lucky to join the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs and Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the member for Sydney, and the Shadow Attorney General and member for Isaacs to speak with Professor Gareth Evans. Professor Evans is a legend in this place and has a significant and long-standing history with Cambodia. Professor Evans indicated in private but also in his public statements on this matter that enough is enough. And in a recent newspaper article he said, quote, "There is a place for quiet diplomacy that relies on quiet engagement to encourage significant behavioural change. But when states behave badly enough for long enough, loud megaphones can also be in order." So what has the response of our government been, Deputy Speaker? Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has been conspicuously silent on these points. She's failed to mention these terrible abuses on her visit to Cambodia, instead focusing on negotiating a new asylum seeker agreement. And it does make one wonder, is the silence strategic? What else could possibly explain turning a blind eye to this conduct? The loud megaphone broadcasting our condemnation is in order, and we call on the government to voice Australia's deep concerns for the situation in Cambodia. Because I have sat with Cambodian leaders and felt their agony while they've told me about abuses in their home country. I was appalled to hear their concerns about the electoral process. I was horrified to learn that there was a ban on assembly. And I was sickened and saddened to hear that citizens were shot dead. The actions were unacceptable. They were unacceptable by Australian standards, they were unacceptable by the standards of the Cambodian community, and they were unacceptable to my constituents in Hotham.
Thank you, Member. The Chamber requires a seconder for the motion.